Home Run with Dion Mattis.
Oh, good afternoon to you and yours as you make your home run. It's time for The Legal Landscape. We're in Season 5, Episode 10. We're looking at drone regulations in Jamaica. Now, recently at the Jamaica 60 celebration, many people would have seen the aerial drone light show. This was done by using hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles called drones. And you know, drones are not new to Jamaica. However, their use is becoming increasingly popular for work and play. Today we'll look at the regulations surrounding their use and penalties that one could face if not operated properly. Kelly Akin, partner in the corporate and commercial department at DunnCox Attorneys at Law, is our guest. Good afternoon, Kelly.
Hi, Dion. Good afternoon.
Well, this is an interesting one for us today. It's a pleasure to have you. Can you share with us what are considered to be drones?
All right. Well, you know, drones are really the common name or the name we would use in ordinary conversation for what's called a remotely piloted aircraft. And now this isn't only drones. I mean, if you saw me on TV, you'd see me using air quotation marks. But for example, you know, it's something that you could pick up in a pharmacy, a toy store. It's also something that's considered an unmanned aircraft system, or an unmanned aerial vehicle. Now, the thing is that with these types of aircraft, it's not just used for fun or as toys, but you're talking about things that can be used for surveillance or research, photography. You go to a lot of parties, you see people flying drones and taking videos of the crowd. And so it's become very commonplace these days. And so I think because of that, the Civil Aviation Authority has issued guidelines on it, which I might add are updated pretty regularly.
Oh, okay. But let me go to the beginning and ask you, how easy, because we don't make them here, I think, how easy is it to import a drone into the country?
Well, I think you're right. I don't think we make them here. But generally, it's pretty easy to import a drone into Jamaica. There's no need for any sort of special permit to get through customs, assuming you're, purchasing something that's regularly market standard, let's put it that way. Except, of course, for the $500 limit that they have at the airport. There's no real restriction on the importation of a drone. But the operation of a drone, and if you're doing it especially for commercial purposes, you're looking at a special permit that would need to be issued by the Civil Aviation Authority for flying. But there's no specific legislation for drones or governing drones, except for, of course, their operation and use.
All right, well, let's look at that then. For the commercial drones, what regulations exist for the use of commercial drones?
All right, so I had mentioned some special circumstances. So drones for commercial purposes, let's give you some categories here. We're looking at aerial photography, which I kind of mentioned before, surveillance, which is more, I hope, on the government side, geometric surveys. You can use it to inspect buildings. People can use it to observe crops, research and development, things like that. That's kind of when I say commercial purposes, that's kind of what we're looking at. And anyone operating a drone for those kind of commercial purposes, they should obtain a permit from the Civil Aviation Authority. And any company using a drone for those commercial purposes, they should have liability insurance in place. And the minimum currently set out by the Civil Aviation Authority is $100,000 US.
$100,000 US.
That's minimum coverage for the liability insurance.
All right. We're speaking with Kelly Akin. She's partner in the corporate and commercial department at DunnCox Attorneys at Law. This is Season 5, Episode 10 of The Legal Landscape, Drone Regulations in Jamaica. We've just asked you, Kelly, about the use of commercial drones and regulations. Are there, and what are, if there is, any regulations existing for the use of recreational drones?
All right, so recreationally, now we're talking about, just if you pick up a drone at a toy store, so and you or your child, whatever it is, wants to fly it around. That's kind of what we call more recreational or a hobby use. And so it's different from commercial uses. And drones used for those purposes, those recreational purposes, do not really require a permit from the authority. But the authority has put in place some restrictions on the operations of those or drones for those purposes. And so I can give you a couple of those restrictions here. So, like, the big ticket items. Like, for example, you can't fly it higher than 400 feet above the ground level. Now, me personally, if I look up, I have no idea where 400 feet is, but I assume someone operating a drone should be able to, tell that sort of distance from the ground.
Yes.
The drone shouldn't be further from the pilot than about, I think it's 1,600 feet. But really the idea is that you don't want it to be out of the line of sight. If you're flying a drone, you need to be able to see it. You should not fly it using first-person view, which anybody that plays video games listening to us should know that that view is that if you're sitting in the cockpit of a plane, that's the kind of view that you're not supposed to fly it with that type of view. Generally shouldn't be flown over a crowd of people, of course, unless there's some sort of permit. For me, I think a big one is you should not fly it over public or private property without permission. And I'm going to add from the owner because, I know somebody around my community got a drone for their birthday, and I've been seeing it. But, it's important to know there's permission that needs to be given by the owner of the property. And I think, of course, the fairly obvious one, don't fly it over JDF or the airport or, any of those restricted areas.
And these are big toys. We look at it as a toy, but let's call it a big toy, eh?
Yep.
So consequences for breaching the regulations you just mentioned?
All right. So when you breach any of the regulations set out by the Civil Aviation Authority, and when I say breach, we're talking specifically about operating it without a permit. That's, of course, where a permit would have been required. Or if you fly it in a reckless or dangerous way that could cause damage to a person or their property. So if you do those things, your actions could result in a fine up to $5 million or 5 years in prison, depending on the circumstances. And I think it's important to highlight it because of how easily it is available on the market today. I kind of think of it when I was growing up as a radio control car. It's so easy, and everyone, can pick up one if they want one.
Yeah. And we take certain things for granted if we're not careful to highlight and say, listen, it's there, but these are the confines within which you can use it. Because things can happen, and when things happen, someone is liable. Who is liable if something happens, Kelly?
Well, outside of the $5 million that I said would be collected by the government as a fine, you're also still looking at civil liability. So if someone is flying a drone and it hits someone else's car, or it hits someone else, their physical person, you're looking at paying damages, a specific dollar figure for either fixing that car, or if that person has to go to the hospital, or let me take it a step further, if the person can't go to work, if there's some sort of loss of income, those are things that can be claimed back and, you go through the court system.
Well, it's a whole lot to look at, but do take care and realize that toys are changing, but while they change, there are still regulations for these things. And we looked at the drone regulations in Jamaica today. Kelly Akin, partner in the corporate and commercial department at DunnCox Attorneys at Law, gave us the run through for today. Did you know what? Do you have any hashtag did you know before you go?
Well, you know what? I do have a little thing, a tidbit for you. If I can take us back down to earth. Did you know that Jamaica is not only one island, but consists of 49 islands?
40? Oh.
It's an archipelago.
Yes.
And because of that, even though Jamaica itself is 11,000 square kilometers, our territory stretches up to 135,000 square kilometers. We're little but we're Talawa.
So in other words, if you really want to fly a drone, go over to Monkey Island or Goat Island or one of those and get some peace. Mad, I tell you. But how many islands again, Kelly? 49?
49, I believe it is, last count.
And give us the landmass.
It is 11,000 square kilometers for Jamaica, the island that we know and love.
Mm-hmm.
But our territory would stretch 135,000 square kilometers.
Wow. All right, that's lots of information today. We always get it from you. Thank you so very much for joining us today for Legal Landscape.
All right, thanks, Down.
Thank you. That's Kelly Akin, partner in the Corporate and Commercial Department at DunnCox Attorneys at Law. She's our guest. If you didn't know before, now you do. The drone regulations in Jamaica.